one of the reasons for that, I think, is just the sheer length of some of the projects that they are involved in, and we're involved in with them. They could be 10, 15 years. So they will be choosing technologies at the beginning which have to be well proven, because they're going to be using those for the next 5, 10 years.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. With us today is Ian Barnes and Ian Darbyshire, directors at Cloudis, a UK company specializing in developing cable and document management solutions for the shipbuilding and other engineering industries. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Ian, so you both have been in the industry for a long time. Cloudis has been around for 25 years, almost 25 years. I just wanted to start by getting your view on the upcoming challenges for shipbuilders and maybe how they've evolved and what's changed in the past 25 years since you've been in the industry.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that's coming to the fore nowadays, more so than has in the past, is collaborative working in shipbuilding. We've probably more experience of working with companies in the naval sector that have really had the whole thing in-house. So, they've had naval architects, systems engineers, detail designers, production, the whole thing on site in one place. And that's becoming, certainly in the commercial environment, less common. So collaborative working, I think, is a challenge that we've definitely come up against recently as a challenge, to be able to say, well, we've got this data that needs to be shared between people, between various organizations, but how do you secure that? How do you break that down into, meaningful areas, and ensure that the people that need to share some data can, whilst protecting other data from, other users. So I think, where we've got, naval architects who are, doing the upfront design, that's being passed to, hull designers who are doing the, general arrangements. That's then being passed to the shipyard who are doing the detail systems engineering and the production as well. So I think that's something that we've come across now and again over the last, say, 10 years, but certainly it seems to be becoming more common, particularly with the companies that that we've been dealing with, along with SSI. I think one other thing is because we're involved in the detail of cable design, cable routing, cable installation, is that, you've got this developing requirement to use a variety of platforms for delivery of the application. So, 10 years ago, you would not have had Wi-Fi available on the ship while cables were being installed, for instance. We're finding now that Wi-Fi is available, and that's meant that, where we would typically have used dedicated barcode scanners, for instance, companies are now saying, well, I want to use a handheld device. I want to use a mobile phone. I want to use a multi-facility type of platform. And that's something that's, obviously puts pressures on developers in terms of, how do we broaden out what we have to be able to be usable? We ourselves have, ours is a database product. The assumption always is that you're working on live data, and the prerequisite to that is do you have a live link to the database? If you do, that's great. If you don't, then you've got to find a way around it, which we've done in the past by having, things like handheld scanners, which have their own memory that can then update the database once you reconnect with it. So all these the kind of things that we look at, it's, not a strategic thing. It's very much a practical application of technology, but they're the things that we think are upcoming challenges for shipbuilders and for us.
There's kind of a stereotype around shipbuilding. It's old-fashioned. It's not moving very fast. But do you find that true on your end, from your experience working with these shipbuilders and seeing the technologies they want to implement?
Well, there's certainly on recent projects, the things like paperless shipbuilding, things like digital twin. These are strategies that are coming through, and the paperless ship is something that fits very much into previous comments about being able to look at data on different platforms. So if I've got a pull sheet to which is my guidelines on how to install a cable, I don't want a piece of paper anymore. I want to be able to see that on a tablet. I want to be able to input what I've done onto the tablet. I've installed 15 meters of cable and so on. So I don't think, the shipbuilding industry is kind of backward in coming forward. There'll be other industries you could look at and saying, yeah, well, they are 5 years ahead or whatever. But no, it's the kind of thing that the kind of challenges that they're coming up with, the ideas. And I suppose that we as suppliers have to be at least in line with them, if not slightly beyond them.
And maybe to Mr. Darbyshire,
I think there is an element of conservatism in the kind of industry we deal with. So they may want to employ these new technologies, and the expectation is that digital is everywhere because that's what they have at home these days, and they expect it to go to their workplace as well. But the actual reality of that is a bit different sometimes, and they do lag slightly. One of the reasons for that, I think, is just the sheer length of some of the projects that they are involved in, and we're involved in with them. They could be 10, 15 years. So they will be choosing technologies at the beginning which have to be well proven, because they're going to be using those for the next 5, 10 years, maybe longer, with probably very little change along the way. Once they've started these projects, they're reluctant to do much about changing them part of the way through. So they've got to get it right at the outset. And that means they're not necessarily using the latest and greatest technology all the time. They're using something which is a bit longer, a bit more proven. But we definitely do see more willingness to do things more electronically. The move away from the spreadsheet is gathering momentum, shall we say. And then the drawing board's no longer there, and it's all CAD. And those sort of things, even 10, 15 years ago, they were still in place. And in certain parts of the world, they still are. But increasingly, they're embracing technology, definitely.
You mentioned the scale and the duration of projects. Is that the main thing that kind of differentiates shipbuilding from maybe other manufacturing industries like automotive or aerospace?
It's certainly one of them. When we first started the company back in '94, and with our first deployment of the cable management in '96, that was with a view to getting involved with the submarine program in the UK, which was still running 15 years later. It's gone now, it's been replaced by a new submarine program, but the software that we put in the beginning of that project was more or less unchanged. It's still us providing the cable management software at the end of it as it was at the beginning. And that's unusual, I think, but you need to be able to support a customer for that duration and give them the confidence that you are going to be there right through it. That's quite important to them. It's important to us as well. I think it sets us apart. That's by no means the only differentiator, though. I think partly for politics, partly for geography, there is an increasing requirement to divide up the shipbuilding work amongst different yards, for example, within one country, but maybe in different countries. So do part of the work in one place and part of it another. So a block structured methodology for constructing the ships. And that has its, for us and for you, its own challenges for how you manage the data that's associated with that. So on our side, for our CMPIC product, our cable database, one of its reasons for being there is to provide, if you like, a single source of truth for all the cables on that project, no matter who is contributing to them.
you're talking about the idea of the single source of truth. It's certainly a topic that we're familiar with here, and that we're striving towards achieving on our end. At the heart of that is data. So how does that influence your approach and your strategy? How do you approach data to achieve that single source of truth?
Well, from day one, we adopted an Oracle relational database. So everything we do is database oriented. No matter what technology we use on the client side to actually access and update that information, at its heart there is a single Oracle database. We chose that all those years ago because of its ubiquity. Oracle is everywhere. It's multi-platform. Most things will talk to it. It can talk to most things. There's plenty of people who understand it. It has never in all those years been a particular problem for us that we are limited to Oracle. It's been a good choice for us. And our other kind of mantra, I guess, one of the things that we will talk endlessly to customers about when we're trying to persuade them to use our product is that like yourselves, I suspect, we are very anxious that they should never enter information twice. So once information has been entered, wherever it may be, then that information is reused in all possible places without having to be typed again ever. And no information should ever be lost. So that database may well grow over time, and there may be information in there at the end of it which you're not quite sure you never needed, but you put it in there. And shipbuilding project, and you want to refer back to an older one, maybe that information will be useful. So our databases are never huge. They're not sort of terabytes of data, but they are on that basis. You could afford to keep all the information forever, to audit everything forever, just so that you've got a history of where you got to, how you got there, who did it, when, and maybe use that information to learn from so that you do your next project a bit better.
Making sure you can reuse that information and always access it no matter what platform you're using or what department you're in is so important. And part of that from our perspective is the idea of partnering and working with other vendors like yourselves and building an ecosystem where information is integrated across a number of platforms. What do you consider from your perspective the role of partnerships and partnering in that way?
Well, I mean, we are a small but important part of the overall process. But, you know, the impact, you can't look at cabling in isolation of design. So design of the cableways has to come from somewhere. You can't look at it in isolation of costing. So costing information, purchasing, all that kind of stuff is, you know, are all systems outside of what we do. So, you know, collaboration with other parties has always been our aim. You know, we're fortunate with the guys at SSI in that you know we speak the same language. We've had some good relationship work in terms of, you know, just talking about data transfer. You know, you've got a SQL database, we have Oracle, but we've made the two talk together, and we've made it so that, you know, decisions, as Ian says, decisions and data entered in one place don't need to be re-entered in the other place, but they are there to be referred to if necessary. So the kind of things we've done are working with, you know, the likes of ERP vendors, PDM, you know, CAD, the whole gamut of collaboration that feeds into CMPIC and also takes data from CMPIC. You know, we've concentrated on things like, you know, we have a fully documented API. We have an XML schema. We can provide people with views of the database. We can, you know, provide Excel outputs if necessary, you know, this kind of thing. So we've tried to be as as broad and as neutral as possible in how we can share data.
You touched on it a bit, and SSI and Cloudis have been partners for almost 10 years now. I was actually just looking at the first announcement earlier today. What has made the partnership specifically between our organizations successful from your perspective?
I think one of the things is that we share. Well, first of all, we share customers in Canada and the US, so that has kind of been a way of looking at examples of where things can be done better. And the two development environments, your development guys and ours have done that through third parties as well. Companies that are resellers of both our products. So that's one thing. I think something else is that SSI, unlike a lot of companies, have acknowledged that actually we're the experts in cable management. We know what we're doing. We've got 25-year history. We've got a product that's robust, that's installed in lots of places. So I think that acknowledgement as well, saying, and we acknowledge the fact that we don't do design of cableways. It's not something we would ever do. We're not in that business. We're in the database business rather than the graphics business. So I think all those things have led us to work more closely with SSI than we have with other third parties, I guess.
You mentioned clients, and one of the clients we've worked together on through the NSRP and our USA team is Austal USA. Maybe I could ask one of you to elaborate on some of these projects with NSRP and maybe beyond, just where we've worked together to achieve something.
Ian, can you talk about what we've done with Austal?
Yeah, so we're talking about the LCS program, which we got involved in with Austal. Obviously, they've done about the first 5 or 6 ships, I guess. So they've been modelling the cableways in ShipConstructor for quite a while, I think. I think they're quite long-term customers of yours. And they moved from having their own in-house cable database, which is still there to some extent, this thing called the MEL. They still use it, but they had always effectively manually routed the cables. They may well be modelling these things in precise detail in ShipConstructor, and they may well have a database that lists all the cables and their start point and their end point. But the actual process of where those cables should go essentially was a manual process, and it was error prone. It was time consuming. It was very difficult to make changes.
In terms of next big things, what are you working on from the Cloudis perspective and the CMPIC perspective in terms of maybe some development goals for the next year, 2 years?
Yeah, well, the big thing we're planning for the next 12 months is to re-platform CMPIC, still based on Oracle, but using a different user interface mechanism, a different development environment, so that will increase the portability, the longevity of the product, and actually will also reduce the initial cost and maintenance cost, because it removes a part of the Oracle product that we currently use that we won't need to use in future. And the other thing is that we're looking at is I mentioned it earlier on about extending portability of CMPIC, particularly production side, so that we can use more digital platforms to enter data, to track production statuses and so on. So I guess they are the two big things. Outside of CMPIC, we have another product called CabCentric, which we're also developing, which is installed in shipyards as well. And that gives that's a database also based on Oracle, but is used for routing of fiber optic cables. and the management of fiber optic cables. Now, that's important from a systems point of view because, particularly in the naval sector, where you've got systems engineers who are specifically on very limited access systems, weapons, for instance, that maybe the signals for those, the information for those is held in along fiber optics. But the fiber optics themselves will be held in a tube, and that tube sits on a cableway, which has been designed in ShipConstructor. And so the two things, so the percentage fill of the cableways reflects the addition of these fiber optic outers, but actually what's in the fiber optic outer is only visible to a limited number of people. So we've got that, the CMPIC and cab-centric, still some work to do on it, but so that the two can live together in the same environment. So some people can see that they're there, but they can't see what's in them. They can see that they're there. They can see the fibers that are in them, but they can't see the signals that are on the fibers, and this kind of thing. So, that's something we're working on as well over the next 12 months to 2 years. So they are the big things we have, as well as, a lot of, pragmatic, practical stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis for customers. Customer comes up with a good idea. We went on site to a UK customer last week, and they came up with 2 or 3 things that we came away with and thought, that's quite a good idea, actually. So we're constantly, revising things. We probably have, a couple of point releases a year that encompass these things, and generally speaking, those enhancements are made available to everybody. If we think they're a good idea, then we incorporate them in the product, and they're available to everyone.
Yeah, I think especially now, shipbuilders are more and more willing to embrace that continuous improvement, and if you can get a little bit more extra value in one area, they're happy to try and implement it and take advantage of it more than ever. Thank you again so much, both of you, for joining me today. It was great to chat with you. I hope we get to speak again soon at our panel. Partner panel later in September.
Yeah. Well,
great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks, Greg. Bye.